borders are cleared for care home visits in England. From April the 12th, a second adult visitor will be allowed, plus small grandchildren.
They will be allowed to come to visit at a time, and you will be able to see your granddaughter. Isn't that lovely? Yes, yes.
Also ahead, demonstrations against proposed new limits on protests take place across England and Wales. A family paid tribute to the 85-year-old great-grandmother killed in a dog attack, and
Robinson makes it 5! Amazing!
Struggling West Brom turn the tables on Chelsea and end their unbeaten streak.
ITV News with Duncon, Golistarnie.
Good evening. In just over a week's time, care home residents who have endured a long and lonely year can finally be reunited with their youngest grandchildren. Residents in England will be allowed a second regular visitor indoors from April the 12th, with babies and young children allowed to come along too. The Prime Minister said the easing of restrictions was down to the tireless work of care home staff and the success of the vaccine rollout. Our political correspondent Hannah Miller has more.
I have a great news to give you today.
For Maureen and thousands of others, it's an announcement that couldn't be more welcome.
From 12th of April, you will be able to see your granddaughter. Isn't that lovely? Yes, yes.
An Easter surprise that gives everyone here a new lease of life.
I'm so happy to hear that they will be able to see and to see their excitement as well. It's a pleasure for me to do that. The satisfaction which you get when you see the smile on their faces.
Visitors will still need to wear PPE and have a negative COVID test, though in some circumstances that could now be done at home.
It's extremely tough. It takes a lot of time, administration time for the staff, particularly the testing, because everyone needs to be tested. But it's the little price to pay for bringing loved ones together.
Loved ones like Rob, who came here today to visit his sister Joan and brought news of his grandson.
It's 5 months now. Yeah.
This is his third visit since restrictions eased, and he's already seeing the benefits.
I've noticed the difference over the last couple of times I've been to see people animated. It's going to make a lot of difference to Joan. So quality of life.
You'll get to see your great nephew for the first time. What does that mean to you?
Oh, it means a lot to me. It means everything. I love children. I really do.
And amid the smallest taste of freedom, the government hinted at more to come.
We will continue to do this carefully step by step come the summer. I want it to feel much more like normal for those living in care homes and their families going through it.
And for many, that can't come soon enough after almost a year of isolation, as they look forward to being able to meet more people like this.
Hannah, the vaccine rollout there being credited for what we've just seen, but more discussion today about a possible side effect of those blood clots.
Yes, Duncan, it comes after the Medicines and Healthcare Regulator revealed that 7 people in the UK have died from rare blood clots after receiving the AstraZeneca vaccine. They say it isn't clear if the jab is causing the clots in total. There have been 30 cases out of more than 18 million doses that have been given out. It's those kinds of concerns, though, that prompted some countries to limit the use of this vaccine to older age groups. But the view here in the UK remains very clear. Scientists and doctors say getting the vaccine is by far the safest choice. The risk of getting ill with COVID is still much greater than the risk that this vaccine may pose. Remember, too, there are side effects associated with all kinds of medication that we do take in everyday life, but a rigorous review of this is going on.
Hannah, thank you very much. There have been protests across England and Wales today against a new police and crime bill that opponents say will severely restrict the rights of people to protest. Our correspondent Martha Fairley is at one rally in Bristol. Martha, the first protest against this bill turned violent. What's happening at this one?
Well, the rally gathered at College Green in Bristol, and there was a very peaceful, friendly atmosphere there today. And after about half an hour or so, the crowd started to move off around Bristol, and they are actually walking around the streets at the moment. The crowd is usually gathered in front of the Bidewell police station, but today they have kept going and taken quite a long route around the streets. So neither the police nor a lot of the people who are walking with the protest know exactly where they're going to end up tonight, but they are all clear of one thing, that they are not happy about this proposed policing bill, that they feel that it will interfere with people's rights to protest. They have been very loud and vociferous, but the previous protest, which took place on the 30th of March, managed to pass off peacefully, and the police will obviously hope that today's protest also ends in a good-natured way.
Martha Bailey in Bristol, thank you. The elderly victim of a fatal dog attack in the West Midlands has been named tonight. Lucille Downer died from her injuries after 2 dogs entered her garden in Rowley Regis near Duncon. The 85-year-old was born in Jamaica and moved to the UK as part of the Windrush generation, spending her working years as a care home cook. Her family paid tribute, saying, "We will miss her dearly." Police have released the owner of the dogs on bail.
Fortunately, these types of incidents are rare. This presented no wider threat to the public. It was a hole in adjacent premises, so they weren't wild running in the streets. It was contained.
8 people, including a 13-year-old boy, have been arrested after rioting in South Belfast last night. Police said 15 officers were injured when they were targeted by a crowd throwing stones, fireworks, flares and petrol bombs.
It's an absolute tragedy. It shouldn't happen, and that's why I'm very keen that people of influence try and ask anyone intent involved in this to please step back. This is not the way to resolve tensions and to make an argument.
And South Wales Police have urged people to stick to coronavirus rules after another mass gathering outside the Welsh Parliament in Cardiff Bay last night. 3 people were arrested for pub order, drink and drugs offences. The US President Joe Biden has led tributes to a police officer killed defending the US Capitol building yesterday. William Evans died and another officer was injured after a man drove a car into them at a security barrier. The suspect, who emerged from the car wielding a knife, was shot dead, Emma Murphy reports.
It had been driven at speed, a weapon to be used against police officers standing guard outside the Capitol building. With 1 officer dead as well as the driver, the blue saloon car was towed away, now part of an extensive investigation into what happened here. The evidence bags filled with the detail, which will help bring some understanding. The driver, 25-year-old Noah Green, was shot dead as he ran the car armed with a knife, seeking and apparently succeeding in harming the officers in front of him.
Police pray across the country. It appears there have been shots.
His actions brought panic to the capital less than 3 months after the last attack here.
Please pray.
Beneath the cherry blossom, so much a sign of spring of renewal in this city, Friday's dreadful events were filmed by those locked down in nearby buildings. The efforts to sustain life, which would ultimately be in vain. The dead officer, William Evans, had served with the Capitol Police for 18 years.
I just ask that the public continue to keep U.S. Capitol Police and their families in your prayers. This has been an extremely difficult time for U.S. Capitol Police after the events of January 6th and now the events that have occurred here.
It fell to Officer Evans' friends and colleagues to offer ceremony and guard on the streets of the city, which he had served for much of his life. The investigation into the last attack at the Capitol is not yet complete, and another one is underway. It seems that Noah Green may have had a history of drug abuse and mental health issues. Whatever his motivation, across the city flags fly at half-staff in memory of a police officer who gave his life in the service of his country. Emma Murphy, ITV News, Washington.
Here, this Easter is the first weekend 3.8 million people who have been shielded in England can leave their homes. Among them is Mary Ann Pillin, who has Down syndrome. But for Mary Ann, her new freedom is tinged with sadness. Her husband Tommy died from the virus at the start of this year. Geraint Vincent went to meet her. Mary Ann and her mum Linda are looking at some old photographs. Of the day, 25 years ago, when Mary Ann married the love of her life, Tommy Pillin.
I'm not just saying it because he's not here. He was one of the most gentlest, sweetest person anybody will ever meet. Anybody that met Tommy fell in love with him. He was the best son-in-law I could ever have wished for.
Tommy died of COVID-19 on New Year's Day. It was the end of a marriage in which he and Mary Ann rarely spent more than a few hours apart. They travelled and they danced, and they overturned prejudices about the kind of lives people with Down syndrome can expect to have.
People would stand there and they'd go, "Oh, are they brother and sister? No, actually they're married." "Oh, really? I've never heard of that before." "No, you have now."
In her grief, Mary Ann has good days and bad days. She's still struggling to understand the pandemic and why it was that Tommy died. She does know, though, that she misses him terribly. You smiled as soon as I said his name, yeah?
He's my husband. He's your husband, isn't he? He'll always be your husband. I'm joking. I don't think squeeze tight. Squeeze you tight, yeah.
And you loved him very much?
I do, I never know. Dream about him a lot, don't you? Yeah. What did you tell me the other day? You said Tommy comes to see you in your dreams, doesn't he? He does. Gives you lots of cuddles. Yeah. And he always wakes up smiling when she's had these nice dreams.
Mary Ann is now among the many who've lost the person they held most dear in this pandemic. Her love story was different, but her heart is broken just the same. Geraint Vincent, ITV News. On to sport, and England made a strong start in the Women's Six Nations this afternoon. The Red Roses beat Scotland 52 points to 10, Doncaster scoring 8 tries to 1. Coronavirus means it's a shortened format this season, with the Six Nations teams only playing 2 group matches each. The 2 group winners then meet in the final. The Premier League returns after the international break today with a shocker for Chelsea. Their 14-match unbeaten run for new manager Thomas Tuchel was ended emphatically by lowly West Brom. It's Golistarnie.
No one saw this one coming, especially when Chelsea, unbeaten under Thomas Tuchel, scored first at Stamford Bridge. West Brom are in a dark place at the bottom end, but Silva's sending off brought just a chink of light.
Thiago Silva is sent off.
And all of a sudden, Chelsea were dazzled by the brilliance of Brazilian Pereira.
And West Bromwich Albion a level.
1-0 down, became 2-1 up with 2 goals in first half stoppage time.
Looking to victory, he's done just that. 2-1, West Bromwich Albion.
If no crowds, lockdown has brought some odd results. This was right up there. It also brought one of the best finishes of the season from Callum Robinson.
Wonderful strike by Callum Robinson.
West Brom had only won 4 games before this, and now they were scoring 4 against the team in the top 4.
Diania slides it in.
Chelsea pulled one back, but West Brom had the last word on an extraordinary day with a 5th goal from Robinson. Sam Allardyce, of course, has seen it all before, saving clubs from the drop, but it would be the ultimate last laugh if he could do it again. Chris Scott, ITV News.
And finally, the Prince of Wales has recorded a verse of Victorian poetry to mark the Easter holiday.
The world is charged with the grandeur of God. It will flame out like shining from shook foil.
It's a line by the Catholic poet Gerard Manley Hopkins, released at the same time as these new photos of the Queen with Prince Charles enjoying a stroll together in Windsor. Tomorrow, the Queen is expected to take part in a private Easter Sunday service at St George's Chapel in Windsor Castle. And that's how it's looking. I'm back with the late news at 10:20. Until then, have a very good evening. Bye-bye.